Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. Welcome to our UNAVSA Talks today. Our UNAVSA Talks is what is defund the police. First of all, so this UNAVSA Talks is hosted by UNAVSA. Where's our UNAVSA? But I will give an intro to our talk today as well. So it's been made clear that the police continue to terrorize our communities, doing whatever they want, mostly without accountability. And we've seen protests and calls to defund and even abolish policing, but to many, living in a world without police seems impossible. So please join us as we explore what is the argument for and against defund the police movement. Does more policing and their funding actually lead to safer communities? Whose interests do the police really serve? And how can we bring about safer and better resourced communities? So, backtracking really quick, this is part of our UNAVSA series UNAVSA Talks. I'm okay, everybody. We're not nervous. We are not nervous. Our series is about what we can do in our communities to create a more just world. In this series, we center our students, educators, activists, and organizers in the Vietnamese Student Association community. And our goal is to provide an education on a range of issues and topics facing the diaspora today, including topics like immigration justice, criminal legal system, education, political power, civil rights, identity, history, all that to create a more just world. UNAVSA Talks will be having a rotating cast of hosts and content leads, and towards the end of our conversation like today, audience members will be able to ask questions, but y'all can ask questions anytime. We have a chat box here. And with that, let's hop into our intros. Did I miss anything? Yeah, okay, I can go first. So, hey everybody, I'm Nicole. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm calling in from Maloney Land, or what is San Jose, California. I am a research analyst for the University of San Francisco. And I'm part of the UNAVSA Academy Committee in UNAVSA, and I'm also a staff member for Amplify Asian America. I am a community member just trying to learn, trying to get involved, and happy to engage in conversations. So thanks for joining, everybody. Love you too, Charlie. I'll pass it off to our other host, Pong.
Sure, I can go next. Hello, my name is Pong Ki-Him Hez. I study and practice abolition. I love and I live and breathe transformative justice in all the various organizations I'm a part of. I'm the secretary of UNAVSA, like finishing off my term in these last 3 to 5 months or so. I currently advise the marketing committee and the newly formed community safety committee. In general, and like all my organizations, I'm not gonna list all of them. I do administrative work. I love like writing and reading. I love just like proofreading, like not being the main writer, but like someone else has written something, they rambled, they put all their thoughts on paper. And then I just edit it so that it's like readable and accessible to people. I love doing that because it's really cool how we fuse our language and our words together. I work in higher education, and I'm pretty critical of higher education for those who follow me. And as someone who's been in those institutions like all of my life, right, being part of an undergraduate college that funnels people and preps people to like be money makers, right, really soullessly. I went to grad school for higher education administration because I just realized I love working with youth leaders. I love working with students. I love working with DSA members. And so, yeah, that's a lot of what I do now. Cindy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy Wang. My pronouns are she, her. I'm Afro-Vietnamese. I'm also a student of Abolition. I'm currently living on Duwamish land in the greater Seattle, Washington area. I'm a community member, local organizer. I'm currently working with Songkasi, which is a multi-ethnic, multiracial, community-based organization with connection to the Puget Sound area. and ancestral connection to Vietnam and the surrounding areas there. I was a former behavior therapist, working with children with autism on the within clinic assessments and stuff, and also working in the Seattle public school system to work on essential life skills and help them advocate for their wants and needs. So I had many roles within the VSA realm, mainly doing civic engagement type work, organizing work with KUVSA, UVSA Midwest, and also UNAVSA. So it's nice being back here and like being welcomed in this space to kind of talk deeper about what it means to defund the police. I'm super happy to be here and talk about this important topic because I know, like a lot of people have always talked about what safety looks like and what security looks like, and a lot of us have grown in a society where police have been present. So to be here and like talk about what a world without police looks like is really important to me. And just having this space for people to listen in and hear about it and learn how we can all together build a more healthy, equitable world. Yeah, this is really awesome. So I'm just very thankful to be here, and yeah.
We are so grateful to have you here, Cindy. So we are so excited. If y'all have seen, like we have been posting on our stories, asking you all, like if y'all had any questions or concerns about topics surrounding defunding the police, and we did get a few questions here and there, so we'll be expanding on those, and feel free to leave any questions or other concerns or comments in the chat as well, and we'll probably get to those. So to start off, one of the questions we had, or like fundamental questions that we'll get to, is what does defunding the police mean? How, why, and there can be confusion with that to begin with, so we can start with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so defunding the police means, like in simple terms or layman's terms, just basically pulling resources away from cops to address societal problems that police clearly don't legitimately address. And then also putting those resources into finding better solutions. So basically that means we're not relying on carceral solutions and punishment to quote unquote solve or address problems, but instead putting our efforts in heavily investing in aid, care, and actual solutions. But yeah, that's the best simple way to put it. So there are a few communities that already kind of practice this already. So there is a program in Denver that sends social workers to different situations that need a response. And I think it's called the Denver Star program. It might be called something else now. But Portland also has something like that where they send social workers to low-level calls. And for the Denver program, as of April 6th, they've never had to call police for backup due to safety issue. So like when we think about that, like that's really incredible. And that's really important that people have already been practicing these things, and like just knowing that it's working means something. So just the idea of defunding the police and police abolition and finding different safety measures isn't something that's new. It's been an ongoing practice for a really long time. But I think just because there's been a lot of attention on that in the last couple of years, there are a few folks that are now learning about this, and I think it's pretty awesome because there are people who want to learn more, and that's kind of why we're here too, to provide that space so people can actually like ask those questions and learn more. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to just mention another, I guess, like non-police program. So for context, there's a number that's kind of an alternative to 911. So for those who don't know, a lot of times 911 dispatchers, they do collaborate with the cops. Like if someone is going through crisis, like they are going to call on their cop buddies that they are friends with. So just putting that out there. But one standing alternative to 911 is 988. And so this is one that responds to like mental health crisis, specifically like suicidality, right? So when someone calls 988 and they express that they're about to commit suicide, 988 actually like geolocates them and tracks where they are right, without their consent, and they send the cops there. So one organization that is trying to work against this is called Trans Lifeline. So Trans Lifeline is a trans-run, trans-staffed resource for trans folks who are experiencing transphobia. And so that organization, for example, is struggling with this threat of 988 because it's fighting against this system. And if it's like, it's struggling to like be absorbed into this. And if it's like not part of that network of people that respond to like mental health crisis, they risk like being kicked out of that network, like losing all the resources and funding and other like partners that it might have. So that's just another example of, you know, people trying to not use the cops to respond to things.
Oh, those are really great examples. And it's really great to like, I know sometimes I go out to, I think one time my parents expressed concerns about it. And it's like, we have these examples here where it's already in place and it's like working out. So you just have to keep imagining forward.
Yeah, I think it's, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's okay, I lost my thought. Yeah, I think it's cool though that there's like, you know, different crisis intervention hotlines that people can call that don't collaborate with the police. But yeah, a huge thing to help folks instead of relying on police is just like basic public safety interventions, right? So that means like building public housing, providing safe injection sites, legalizing marijuana, healthcare for all that's not tied to employment or like conditional whatsoever, providing access to food, education, basically providing access to all these resources so that people don't engage in behaviors that harm others. But I think a lot of folks don't realize that like these are all really basic things that we can do for other people that will mitigate like quote unquote crime or harm that happens to community members. But yeah, the more we rely on cops, the more we are feeding into our own harm and our own destruction, as sad as that is. And it's pretty wild because a lot of these things that we are talking about now that are kind of interventions to a lot of the harm that's been done due to the prison system, it's because people aren't investing in other people. That's really what it is. And people have been begging for these things for years. All of these things were implemented, and if everyone's basic needs were met, there would be less unnecessary deaths. Like we would be thriving instead of surviving consistently. And yeah, and that's something that I sit on all the time because we really do need to rely on each other and help each other in order to be a functioning, caring community.
Yeah, like addressing the root cause of like in the case that somebody needs like something from the store but they can't get it, so they just like go get it, and then sometimes they get in trouble for that, but then we should have had something in place where that need for them was already met, so they wouldn't have to like take it. Yeah, I see you want to say something.
Yeah, I want to add on to what Cindy was saying, and sorry if this sounds like like a ton of like a what's it called, where people say like, oh, you're just repeating the same argument back and forth. The thought train. No, you know what it's called?
You're fine. Go for it.
Anyway, you know, to everything that Cindy was saying, I want to look at something like responses to sexual violence. This is, I mean, I've been reading a lot about this. I've been studying this. I talk with other organizers about this because like it's very real. But like, did y'all know like in the 70s, like there were more grassroots radical feminists who were like doing community-based solutions to things like so content warning, rape, sexual assault, sexual violence, intimate partner violence, domestic violence. They were forming communities and looking for things like doing things like mutual aid, providing like housing each other, like giving money, like doing community-based things and not relying on sending someone to the cops or sending someone to jails. And also, and this is what some feminist anti-violence organizers have said, is that like in the 70s and prior to that, the cops didn't give a shit about rapists, and they didn't give a shit about rape. So what has happened is that in the 1980s moving forward, the more mainstream feminists, the more mainstream anti-violence organizers who were depoliticized, who were more, who were less like radical, right? Who were less grassroots and more of the like the institutionalized, professionalized, liberal and even conservative, right? They called for collaboration with the cops and prisons, and for harsher punishments and consequences for those who do harm in our communities. So thereby like adding to this, and so all the money that was like that was advocated for by those mainstream groups, by those again, those not those grassroots orgs, not those radical orgs, but the more like professionalized organizers, they funneled a lot of the money, and they called for a lot of money to go into policing and prisons. There were feminists in the past who celebrated something like the Violence Against Women Act that was part of the 1994 crime bill, which was just the biggest expansion of policing in prisons in the United States. So to everything Cindy was saying, just know that like a lot of money has been put to like create this myth that police are the answer to our problems, when we know for a fact that it's not.
Mm. I wanted to add something that is kind of like a trailing off of this idea, or I thought of it when both Cindy and Pong were speaking, and it just reminded me of a time when I was at a protest, and I noticed that there like were no cops, which was great because there were these group of motorcycle. It was like a motorcycle group, and they were like these really big, strong-looking guys, and they were there to like look out for the protesters instead of having cops there. And I felt like really safe with them, and so I was like, this is like police alternative in action, working alongside us right now. And I hope and wish that others would be able to experience and see that with me. So hopefully in the future there would be more of that as well. Yeah, I just wanted to plug that.
Yeah, in Seattle, we have, or we had for a while, a car brigade, a bike brigade, different groups that came together to protect a lot of the protesters and the people on the streets when we were fighting for change every single day for like a long ass time, right? So like having these groups and these systems, like a lot of us have been or already doing things to protect each other and look out for each other and provide that safety and security without police. So it's like really interesting that a lot of folks who aren't really in the know about safety, like aren't even thinking about the possibility of continuing those types of things to the greater community so that we can defund the police and ultimately abolish them because they do not serve our interests. They perpetuate violence. Yeah, they cause more harm than anything. And it's really interesting that a lot of people who just aren't in these communities, like just really heavily rely on them. But at the same time, for me, it's kind of expected because those are the people that are usually the wealthy folks that know that cops do protect their interests and their property.
Mm.
Oh, so Nicole, before you move on, if you move on to your next question, I want to just finish this thought on like what is defund. So what you were saying, Cindy, not being in the know or not being aware of like groups' demands, right, or things. Like in summer 2020, I saw people like putting Black Lives Matter, but like I'm not sure if they read the demands of the movement for Black Lives or for any of the local chapters of like Black Lives Matter like groups or any like Black liberationist groups, and it was very concerning because like, oh wait a minute, did y'all not see that they're calling for defunding the police? Did y'all not see that they're calling for more community-based solutions to our problems? Like in summer 2020, again, I saw, not to call anyone out, I saw some VSA members, who I care about. They shared this like really, really terrible post. It was like, oh, when we say defund, we don't actually mean abolish. We actually mean, and then it's like something. And sure, that can be true if you're a reformist that believes that policing in prisons are a good thing, right? That you still want these things to be intact because you believe that that they are the answers to our problems. But actual organizers who are doing defund work and working to minimize the power of policing in prisons, like we know that defund is an abolitionist demand. It is a clear strategy. Like it is a budget fight, right? And it is a central demand that is led and forged like by Black organizers in the United States and other parts of the world.
Actually, I'm really glad you brought that up. To be like super, super, super honest, I was like writing the blurb to this event, and initially it had like, I think initially I was going off the thought that we're going straight to abolition, but after doing like a little more thinking, reflecting, I was like, this doesn't work out. So thank you for bringing that up. Oh yeah, I think something we can touch on is there's probably the argument out there that actually there's a lot of argument out there that why don't we just reform the current system? And I think this is a big topic, or this is something we can definitely expand and share on how this, it may like on very, very surface, it can seem like it, but you do not be fooled because it's not an option. Did anyone want to expand on that?
Yeah, so I guess like when we talk about reform, we can backtrack a little bit and kind of like dive into like what police actually do, like what they function as. And police are actually fascists who take away resources from us. They brutalize and murder people. They exist to protect the elite and their property. They come after a crime has occurred. So they respond after harm has happened, right? So police really don't give a shit about us, and they don't care about the working class people. And the fact of the matter is, we have politicians that create the policy of the elite, of the wealthy people, and what police do is they enforce that policy. So they just really serve and protect the interests of the banks and corporations. So in order to understand like what reform is and what police abolition means, you have to understand the function of the police and what they do, who they protect, and who they serve. Because at the end of the day, it's not the majority of the people that live in this country. So that's why police reform simply isn't an option, because if you're saying you want police reform, you're saying that it still means that we have to rely on a system that's meant to keep people behind bars, that it means that there's going to be more Black people in prison, more women in prison, more trans folks. Like, you're saying that's okay when it's not. Like, that is dehumanizing, and it's consistently going to perpetuate that cycle of harm. So that's why reform won't work, and it hasn't worked. And people will throw around the terms like criminal justice reform, police reform, bail reform, all these things that center reform around the legal system. But when they say that, it's like they want to make it seem like the penalties are like less harsh, but we're still relying on carceral solutions to address societal problems, but you're not really addressing those societal problems because they still exist and police can't solve those problems. So it's kind of like a gotcha, yeah. And people kind of like masquerade like police reform as like an effective change, but ultimately defunding the police's work and also abolishing the U.S. police system is what is ultimately is going to stop the violence. Yeah.
Yeah,
Really
can I jump in?
appreciate. Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if we need to leave like on the dot at the hour. I just want to say something super quickly. Everyone, prisons themselves were a reform. They were a reform to corporal punishment. So like like grievously hurting people. Ironically, it causes immense harm to people by separating them from their communities, by subjugating and immobilizing people into a crowded space where more harm can happen. Right? We talked about before in our past UNAVSA talks, like prison rape jokes. They are not out of nowhere. It is because there is an implication, there is an understanding there that prisons are violent places. Anarchist organizer Dean Spade, and he does a lot of mutual aid work. He talks about the biggest rapists in the world are prisons because of the way that it gets rid of your bodily autonomy. If anyone's ever talked to anyone who's incarcerated, who's caged, who's locked up, and really sees about and learns about the dehumanizing conditions that they go through, it is terrible. It is terrible that it exists. Sorry, that's about prisons. Now policing. Sorry. So when it comes to reform of policing, policing is an anti-Black system and institution. There is nothing to reform. No amount of like non-white, like Black, Latinx, Asian, queer, trans, disabled cops is going to change that, because they are the ones inflicting harm on their communities as well. We saw that with Peter Liang back in 2014, right? I can't wait to answer this question that someone posed here. But
yeah. Oh,
we can do it later.
I don't see it. Okay. Wait, hold on. Is that a recent question? I might have missed it.
Yes, this person in pink wrote, if not prisons, where would you lock up prisoners and murderers? And Cindy, I know we are going to go ham on that.
You first.
Sure. Oh my goodness. Like right now? Okay. So a lot of what I teach in UNAVSA spaces and in the VSA conferences that I've been a speaker of to talk about abolition, to talk about transformative justice, there is an understanding and an analysis of what harm and violence is. Like, it's not enough to reduce like interpersonal harm and people who do interpersonal violence as, oh, that person was just born violent, that person is just born evil. Like, that is an incomplete picture of like how the world works. Like so Danielle Sarad, who is part of Common Justice, so COMMON JUSTICE, that is a restorative justice organization here in New York City. She has this great quote that it's like, no one enters violence for the first time having committed it. So what does that, so if we take that principle and honor it fully, what does that mean? It means we are taught to be violent. If we are taught to be violent, where are we learning it from? So it's not just each other. It is from like larger institutions. It is from larger systems. It is from systems that say that violence is okay. There was a tweet the other day which encapsulated this really well, that prisons model immobilization, capture, surveillance as an appropriate response to violence. That is what it models. And so the argument, if we extend that further to policing, then the appropriate response to harm in our communities is to send people with batons and guns to harm us in return, because that's the supposed solution. I have more to say specifically about what to do about people who have done harm, because that's very prevalent in the VSA space. Because as we know, in summer 2020, many survivors in the VSA space talked about how they were harmed by other community members, right? The people that are harming people are not strangers. They are not out there. They are in here. Like, it is us. It could be anybody. If we understand that harm is anywhere, is everywhere, right? Like, anyone can be harmful, then we really can't make villains out of people. Like, anyone can be harmful. We all have violent tendencies because we were brought up in a violent society. I have more to say that I want to address, like murders and rapists specifically, but Cindy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of bounce off of that. Like, yes, we are conditioned to believe that violence is okay. The things that we see growing up, the way that the U.S. prison system exists, like, yeah, so just villainizing people without looking at the root causes and looking at why people do certain things, that's one of the problems. And I think it's just really interesting when people ask, like, oh, what are you going to do about the rapists and murderers that are, out there? It's like, like, you're not acknowledging the fact that police are rapists and murderers. Like, there's a statistic that says, like, 1 in 3 people that are killed by a stranger in the U.S. are killed by police. And then there's another one that says excessive force and sexual misconduct are the number one and number two most common complaints filed against police. So the thing is, police perpetuate sexual violence. They perpetuate harm. So just saying that, what are we going to do about those people? This is exactly what we're going to do about those people. We're going to defund the police and abolish that system that perpetuates that harm. And the bottom line is, like, you know, abolishing them literally would decrease that. Yeah. And some people, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, and I feel like some people like want solutions now and like want to know like what exactly everything looks like. But honestly, a lot of it is going to be a process. So defunding the police, it's not, or defunding the police and abolishing the police, it's not going to be an overnight thing. And it's not going to be a thing where like we just like allow everyone to do what they want and like not have structures in place to reduce harm, have structures in place to rehabilitate people. Because transformative justice and restorative justice, those are things that can work and help people integrate back into society. But we don't have enough conversations surrounding that and what that looks like and how that can come to life in our societies, because those will help us, you know, address these issues of harm, which police clearly do not. So.
Yeah, and Cindy, to that point, so you mentioned transformative justice and restorative justice. That's actually a central reason why, like, I mean, you know, not to toot my own horn, but like, I volunteered to like advise the community safety committee for a reason, right? Like, again, not to like pedestal myself. Like, I have this analysis. I've met other UNAVSA members and VSA members who have this analysis as well, that they are tired of locking people away, of banishing people away, of removing people away, and not confronting the violence that happens to them by their loved ones, right? I saw this happen when I went to New England, right, when I talked about transformative justice, and I definitely saw this when I went to UVSA Midwest, when another organizer and I, Kevin Huynh, we talked about how to give a good apology. Because the cultures that we live in do not incentivize us to tell the truth. And I got a lot of like head nods when I said this fact out in the Midwest, but it was like, hey, there are a lot of times like the people that do harm, they're not the first ones that are going to admit the truth, right? It is the survivor, it is the community, it is the people that witness their harmful behavior. And so we really have to figure out, like, okay, why is that? And doing it on this level, which is, you know, not as severe per se as like murder, it helps us prepare for that. So, like, I mean, honestly, I don't know what to do with the murderers at this moment. I'm not afraid of saying that. But what I can do, what I do know, what I can respond to is to the rapist question, because I mean, sorry. Okay, if any survivor is watching this, I apologize. I'm not trying to make like an example out of you. This sounds like I am. But if you read through every survivor like experience that is on social media, like, all of them did not call for the cops. All of them did not call for court systems to sue the other person that harmed them. All of them did not call for them to go through prison, right? They all like demanded an apology. Like, that was the common thread amongst like most or all of them. They wanted their communities and the people that harmed them to acknowledge what happened, to tell the truth, right? Because like that is like the bare minimum that is being asked. It is not, hey there, NYPD, hey there, local police department, I want you to punish this person, send this person to jail, and inflict pain upon this person. Like, that was not the common thread. It was to acknowledge the truth, and it was to promise that they would not harm again, right? And it's with that fact, right, that we need to organize around. And again, to what Cindy was saying, it is not going to be an eventual process. I've already had conversations, whether or not it's in the VSA space, with people who have done violence. It is a very awkward, uncomfortable conversation. It is not supposed to be easy, right? But like, it's worth it in the long run to really make sure that people that we love, our community members, are not going to go and continue to do violence. That was a lot. Nicole, do you have any thoughts? We've been talking a lot.
I feel like y'all had really good points. I'm also like, I'm learning a lot, absorbing while you are talking. I'm the listener. I do have thoughts, but they're like back from a while ago. So I'll just plug it real quick. I know you were like mentioning like prisons are like not the place to be. And I have like a stack of books right in front of me, and I pulled out this like if folks want to read stories of prisoners, I have this. It's written by a PSC, and I started reading it, and it's tough, but it's like very, very real, and it hurts. It's really heartbreaking. So I'll like put this in at the end again for folks who like want to read it, because it's good for them. Yeah.
Nicole, what's the name of the book?
Oh, it is called Other: an Asian and Pacific Islander Prisoners Anthology. So it's like written work by AAPI prisoners. Yeah, it's really good. It's really intense. Thanks for letting me plug that thought. I think we can address one of the other questions that we got in our question boxes. And I'll read it now. It says, oh yeah, so the concern is that police will still have enough money to keep effing up people's lives. Basically a concern that defunding the police is not enough to stop the situation.
I mean, as long as the police exist, they're going to keep fucking up people's lives, and that's like the reality of it. But that is a real concern, like, so that's completely valid. Abolitionists, like, we always talk about, imagining a world without police, but to get there, sometimes we have to like negotiate and like say, oh, defund, for people to even let us in through the door, for people to even let us like sit at their table and like talk about community solutions. So I just wanted to put that out there, because sometimes like it'll like this whole thing, it's going to take a lot longer than just like, going straight to abolition. And a lot of us recognize that. So that's why, it's very real that it's like harm's going to continue to happen with police existing, because we aren't there yet where we can completely get rid of them, because not enough people are on the same boat, to be quite frank.
Yeah, and also to a lot of what Cindy was saying earlier, that all the money has been funneled into like them, right? And like not into like other resources that we need. Something like restorative justice and transformative justice, those things are not being funded a lot. But they're not being funded a lot, period. Right. I mean, in New York City alone, I think last year was $11 billion to the police department. Right. How much of that is going to hospitals? How much of that is going to education? How much of that is going to housing, our transportation system? If anyone's been in New York, you know how dirty it is on the street. I also want to say that, in general, like abolitionists are not about cutting costs. Right. These budget fights that we talked about earlier, these are zero-sum games, because there's a limited amount of money. And we see that in a lot of our cities, the money goes towards the police. It goes to their overtime. It goes to them defending against lawsuits by like survivors and families of victims. It's just really terrible. Even just in the past 2 weeks, there are homeless encampments. So unhoused and houseless people, right? They've had their belongings taken away from them, destroyed, by not just the police, but an institution like the sanitation department, because our cop mayor wants to like disappear them. It is fucking terrible. So again, police budgets are extremely high compared to other institutions and services. And as abolitionists, like we really want to spend the money into the institutions that do provide true, genuine safety.
I'm thinking, oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, what was I going to say? Yeah, it's pretty wild. There's like a lot of police officers actually in Seattle that make over $100,000 a year. And that's pretty high. Like the Seattle Police Department here is one of the highest paid departments across the country. And when you look at like these big departments like New York City or like in LA, like they have so much funding that it's outrageous, where we could funnel all this money into services like Pong was mentioning, because they use a lot of this money for like the most unnecessarily unnecessary things. Like there are police Tesla vehicles out there. There are drones. People are like spending so much money on like different surveillance things and different types of technology that we don't need, because these things are aiding the police in incarcerating more people. And also police spend a lot of time, or not a lot of time, but yeah, a lot of time and money to resolve misconduct. And I know that Hong mentioned that too. They have so much war equipment, and they have so much tech and so many facilities that a lot of our tax money literally, and a lot of the funders that they get from the unions, like we're all paying for the destruction of our lives and well-being. And it's just really sad, because we could be funding education for children. We could be funding, you know, hospitals, so much more than what's happening right now. So it's highly concerning.
Yeah.
Nicole, can I comment on LA for a second?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so scholar based in California, his name is Dylan Rodriguez. He's a Filipino man. He's been with Critical Resistance and Abolitionist organization for years. He's talked about how like really devious and insidious that Los Angeles Police Department actually is. So they have this thing called the Join LAPD effort. It's essentially a diversity, equity, and inclusion campaign that seeks to like obtain, so again, non-white, Black, Latinx, Asian, queer, trans cops into the system, and they go through heavy marketing campaigns. You can actually go through Instagram and look through I think Join LAPD, and you'll see it. They are like going heavy on like propaganda and marketing and PR. So this is where this is where the tax money is going to. This is where the money for your city is being spent on. It is being spent on a PR department for the cops, and that's just in LA. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, like,
Oh.
It's just adding on to, like, it's just everything that they're doing is for them, and I feel like I'm just adding to the complaints. But it's like, if we could fund elsewhere, like, then we would be relying less on the police, and then the police would be like, oh, what do we do? But they're out here, like, creating or like further worsening the issues so that they have more, I don't know, they are like deployed there to do more, and it's just very unnecessary. All right, back to you, Cindy.
What was I talking about? Oh, I think I was going to talk about like police propaganda. So there's a lot of police propaganda in the TV shows that we watch. There's a lot of cops on TikTok that play with kids, and they'll put it like on their TikTok or on their Instagram, talk about like all the good that they do for the community. And it's true that there are individual people that can do good, but at the same time, it's the whole policing system. It's not just a few bad apples, it's the whole tree. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that the entire US policing system is so corrupt and was built on patrols that caught Black folks to enslave them. Like there's this long-standing history of the establishment of police, and people need to acknowledge that and why they exist and how they currently operate in today's society in order to really dive deeper into like what we can do to address societal problems and abolish them ultimately. But yeah, there's so much propaganda out there that really paints this picture of like cops being good society members. Like this is like kind of their way of recruiting more cops. And no matter how many Black, Asian, Latinx, queer cops they recruit, at the end of the day, like they have to go because they are not serving our community members. They are not protecting. They're doing nothing but literally just further perpetuating the harm and the criminalization system. But yeah. And I think it's important to also note that when we talk about defunding the police and abolishing the police, we aren't just talking about the cops that are at your local police departments. We're also talking about ICE, you know, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We're talking about school police resource officers, you know, that contribute to the school to prison pipeline. We're talking about the cop in your head. We're even talking about the social workers, the therapists, the people in social services that legit send people to the cops to be imprisoned. Like, there are so many quote unquote cops in our society that we have to abolish them all in order to maintain and create healthier relationships with people and create a healthy society. Because it extends much further than just your local police department. There are kids in cages right now. There are a plethora of like Black and brown children in schools that are being sent to detentions and also being sent to or being set up to go to jail and eventually go to prison because teachers are just, you know, cops, honestly. But yeah, it's really sad because at the end of the day, like when you talk about dismantling the prison system and abolishing cops, like you have to ask yourself, like, is this like, who's actually getting justice? What does justice look like? Is it, you know, people being sent in a revolving door prison system where harm keeps being perpetuated? Like, what is that? Because this is not working. This is not helping anyone. Yeah, so we must divest from that in order to grow.
Yeah, I want to add on to a more granular level and apply it to VSA spaces. To anyone watching this, I mean, it's going to piss some of y'all off. VSA members want something different than punishment. They want something beyond the carceral logics that we've been talking about. They want to move beyond policing other community members. And I've seen that again with the Community Safety Committee and along with the various regions that we've been able to speak at and the amount of people that have been engaging with us. Yeah, when we're talking about defunding and abolition, we're not just talking about the actual institutions. We're talking about the logics, right? The attitudes, the behaviors that all of us internalize. I've had some discussions on community safety and how to deal with conflict, right? Just conflict, not harm, not violence, conflict. Some people are resorting to cop behaviors, like, oh, let's remove that person, right? Let's punish this person. That is their gut instinct. It is a bloodlust, as one of my comrades says. And that is something that we have to unlearn. Because if you remember what I said earlier, right, we are all taught to be harmful. We are all taught to be violent, and we are all socialized and conditioned to embody punishment. Okay, so Michelle Go was killed, right? She was pushed to death in New York City just last month, and the man that pushed her, right, that killed her, is Simon Marshall. He's a Black. He had disabilities, right? And I think he pled like it wasn't that a hate crime, or it wasn't, he was not guilty. And then like a VSA member, posted that story from Next Shark, which is a very terrible publication. FYI, I've said that. I wrote that multiple places. I said what I said. He said torture. That man should be tortured. This man who is Black and disabled, who has been through like psychiatric systems, right, and has not like recovered or been rehabilitated or healed, right, to torture that man. And that's a very real feeling that we need to address, and we really need to talk to people, because again, like, not everyone in the space wants revenge. Not everyone in the space wants punishment, and therefore not everyone in the space wants police. If you were that person I was referring to, just know that I care much about you. Happy birthday. You are a great community member. I do care about you. I just thought that was an incredibly violent story that you had.
Well, I'm so speechless. Thank you for like elaborating on that.
It makes me like really excited that there are so many. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
No, you're all good. My internet is like spacing out, so please continue. I was like just checking.
Oh, yeah, I think I'm just like super excited that there are folks like in the VSA space that want to transform their own space, like, change the policies. Like, this is just like really just awesome to see, because VSA back when I had started was not that space. It was very, and I understand that there's like so many nuances and a lot of things are going to take time, but like the fact that people are actually having those conversations now and are reworking their policies and are questioning things, like, that's a huge step, considering how VSA was built and all these foundations that it started with. So that's a huge step. And I think that's awesome that there's people in there for the long run waiting and working with other folks to change things. Because that takes a lot. Shout out to Palm.
Yeah, shout out to Paul and safety committee.
Shout out to the community safety committee. Shout out to Nicole. Shout out to Charlie. Shout out to Teresa. Sorry. You're okay. This is a downer response. Cindy, yes, and there are people who are going to reproduce policing logics. I have seen it already. I have read through multiple organizations' policies. Like, it is still there. The default is to call the authorities, right? Because that's all they know. That's all that, like there has been, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, there has been little work, but it's growing. But there needs to be increased work in like really developing those community-based responses to harm, to developing those community-based responses to violence and abuse that happens in our communities. And frankly, we as like a space need to be better at like conflict. We need to be better at having open generative conflict. All conflict is not bad. If you have a problem with someone, say it to their face, say it with your chest. You do not have to be afraid. Don't use a proxy. Oh, sorry, I'm projecting. Like that's a very core skill. Like abolitionists are not conflict avoidant. We are not like being passive aggressive about this. We are going up against a system that is violent. Like there is no like, oh hey there, can you please not do this? No! Like what is wrong with you? Like we're not gonna professionalize or be polite about it. We're asking a system that is heavily funded, that has 30, 40, 50 years. And if you want to go back into like enslaving Black people, like 200, 400 years worth of building, right, that we're up against. So, policing and prison logics are in our spaces, and it's up to us, it's up to anyone who's watching, it's up to all the various people that we've met throughout the past 2 years who want something more liberatory, to really like challenge the policies in our organizations. Like, hey there, why are we calling the cops on our community members when the survivor hasn't called for that at all? Right?
Oh my God, did it freeze?
Yeah.
Con, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Nicole's frozen though.
Well,
yeah, we have a few minutes left together. Do you want to end on the hour or like?
whatever works with y'all. I mean, I could stay a few minutes after if y'all need. Did you want to close out or?
I mean, I personally want to address like one more thing. But let's get Nicole back on.
There she is.
I'm so sorry. My internet is like not working with me. I'm so sorry about that. Were y'all speaking on something?
I was speaking, Cindy gave affirmations to the trajectory of the VSA space. I gave a response that, hey there, yes, and there are some people who are very carceral. So for those of you who don't know, carceral means of relating to prisons and policing. It is logics, behaviors, and attitudes. When someone is carceral, they believe that prisons and police are the right thing. When someone is carceral, they believe that law and order is the right thing. When someone is carceral, they believe in crime and punishment. That is what we are against.
Yeah. And it's like, it's been so ingrained into like our upbringing and everything on this all this time. So we challenge folks to like challenge that thought before they act on like their anger or feelings. It's planting the seed.
Oh yeah, one more thing on this. Abolitionist work is not legal. It is not always legal. So if anyone thinks that legal systems are just and right, you need to like unlearn that or like challenge that, because I mean, Okay, so I did a training for one of my jobs, right, this year. Um, the default response to any type of workplace violence or sexual harassment was to call the cops or school safety or public safety agents. That was the default, regardless of what the survivor wanted. There was no consideration to what survivors and victims wanted in that training module, and that was sent to at least like I don't know 1,000 employees at my job. So that is the dominant way people think about safety, to just like bypass the survivor's agency and autonomy, and to inflict punishment.
I know we're running out. Oh, I see we have a new question. Yeah, my questions are finally coming in. I'm sorry I couldn't see them earlier. I see a question that's like, wait, so do we think all, most, or only some cops are bad? Thank you for your question. It's the whole batch. It's the whole system, to put it short. Yeah. You may see.
Can you give more nuance or no?
Yeah, I'll give like a really quick blurb, but then I'll let y'all give more context because I feel like y'all more eloquent in your explanations. But if you haven't read already, there was a piece called Confessions of a Bastard Cop. So I recommend you looking that up and reading through that. It gives a confession of a former cop, and they give like a really good rundown of what they experienced in their time. Cindy, you can elaborate if you wanted to. I know we already
I think the massive footage of police violence throughout 2020, 2021, and 2022 is enough for me. I don't really know what else. I mean, because maybe some people's friends and families are cops. I mean, they're just upholding an anti-Black system. Like, you can trace the history of like police in the United States. It's based on punishment. It's based on capture and surveillance. Again, like in New York City, we're seeing that right now. Eric Adams, the new mayor, is enforcing broken windows policing. I see policing throughout the New York City subway system more than there ever was in 2020 or 2021. It is a resurgence of the early 2000s when policing was really hurting Black and brown communities in New York City.
Yeah, the Confessions of a Former Bastard Cop, that's a really good read because it really provides a lot of insight into like police misconduct, like the way that police cover things up, the way that they lie to us to get to do what they want. It literally just like explains why all cops are bastards in this US policing system, because even if they don't commit harm themselves, they'll never rat out someone in their police department that does, and or will help cover up whatever that thing is. So that's really important to like acknowledge, because even if you're that cop that plays with kids or like hosts pizza parties, does all these things in the community, I guarantee you probably wouldn't be that person to rat out your coworker, and if you did, like, you probably would get fired. And that's the problem. Like, that's why policing systems in the US like just aren't working, because good cops don't exist. They don't exist. It's the whole system. It's the whole tree. It's not just a few bad apples. And we have to think about it on a systemic level, and not just like, oh, here's a good cop, here's a bad cop. That's not it. It's literally the entire system that is vile.
So again, even in this format, in this thought process, it is a systems analysis, right? We are looking at systems, we are looking at structures. It is not enough to focus on the interpersonal. It is not enough to focus on the individual, because that is an incomplete picture of how the world works. It is an incomplete picture of how we live in society. We do not live in vacuums, individual vacuums, like here on this IG Live, right? We live with other people, we live with other communities. So it's really important to look at the bigger picture. Right? So we treat not just interpersonal violence seriously, we treat state violence seriously as well. And cops are one agent of state violence.
Thanks, Paulin. Thanks, Cindy. I know we've hit the hour mark now, and I don't want to take up any of your time. Appreciate both of you for like your knowledge, and like y'all shared so much great information and I'm sure the audience really appreciated it. Did y'all have like, I know we couldn't get through everything we wanted today, so audience members, if you enjoyed or are interested in what we talked about today, let us know. There will also be a recording posted, so you can watch that video and you can comment on that video as well. But Cindy and Pang, did you like have any last words you wanted to say before we hop off? Or audience members, did you have any last questions?
Cindy, I can go. I can share final thoughts.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
I didn't know if it was.
All right, we didn't get to touch upon this, but in the ongoing attacks against Asian people, violence against Asian people, we see time and time again that the smaller grassroots community organizations, they are not calling for more policing. They're either calling for less policing or full-on abolition. It is very important to take note of that. And it is like the bigger nonprofits, the ones who are invested with cops, the ones who are invested in the criminal legal system, that go against that. And so that is like not an enemy, but that is something that we have to watch out for, right? I want you to lean on to organizations like the CFIN Network, APSC, right? In New York City, Mekong, in Philadelphia, Viet Lead, Sikh Village, down in like North or South Carolina. Sorry, I forgot. Like organizations like these are calling that shit out. So yeah. Okay. That's all.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add, but yeah, this was a really great discussion, and I just wanted to thank y'all both so much for having me here, for providing this space for folks in VSA to learn more about defunding the police and police abolition, because this is really important, and I hope this conversation / this whole talking session, I don't know what these are called, but I hope this continues because this is just really important work right here. So I just wanted to give claps to y'all for that.
Thank you. With that, I think that will be the end of today's UNAVSA talks. So thanks everyone for hopping on, and have a great rest of your Monday.